Good Wednesday, everybody. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandajis here with your tropical update on potential tropical cyclone number 9. Now, before we get going, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Of course, we're getting close to the peak of that hurricane season in August and September, and we're going to be putting these videos out pretty often. And if you like what you see by the end of the video, hit that like button as well. All right, let's talk about PTC number 9, because as it grows and organizes and potentially becomes our next named storm, Isaias, our 9th named storm, there are a couple records that may fall. Of course, if I name does develop, it'll beat out Irene, August 7th, 2005, in regards to the earliest occurrence of an I named storm. And if it develops in July, only a few days left, and the likelihood is pretty high that we see it by the end of the month, it would make for 5 named storms in the month of July, tying the most on record, which was July in 2005. So we'll watch those two records closely. First, I want to talk about some hurricane history before we get into the actual technical analysis of what's going on with PTC number 9 right now. Do you ever hear people talk about saying, we'll always watch out for that I named storm? I know we talk about it a lot here on the East Coast because there's been a lot of I named storms that have been pretty memorable in the past. So why do people usually say that? Well, the I named storm has the most retired names associated with it. 11 times an I named storm has been retired, the most out of any letter. Interesting, right? Look at all the tracks from the I named storms, all of the retired I named storms. A good amount of them, in fact, the majority, impacting land masses in the recent past. So what goes into retiring a storm name? Well, it has to be either extremely deadly, extremely costly, or both. And at that point in time, it's deemed insensitive to use the name again, and it is retired and taken off the rotational list of names. Since 1954, there have been 88 names that have been retired from that list. Now, the record for the most retired storms in a season, can you guess what year that was? The most active season on record. That was 2005. That year, there were 5 separate storms that were so costly, so devastating, that their names were retired from the list and will never be used again. There's a little bit more, though. You have to look at exactly when those 11 storms developed, the I named storms we're talking about, that were retired. When they developed matters, because the 9th named storm, the I named storm, is pretty far into a list in the season. They develop later on in the season. And if you look at the 11 named storms here of I origin, the dates in which they developed, you see a lot of Septembers here. When you take the average from all of those dates that they developed, you get a date of September 9th. That date sounds pretty familiar, right? It's very close to the actual climatological peak of the hurricane season. So the atmosphere, the environment is the most favorable. It is all year long during that time frame, which is why the I name is the most retired name out of all the letters in the hurricane name list. All right, let's get to what's going on right now with PTC number 9. You can really pick it out. It's a very large system. It's entered the Caribbean now. And as we look at the infrared satellite imagery on here, the temperature of the cloud tops, if you're just joining us, we talk about this filter on the satellite imagery pretty often because this gives us an indication of the strength of the convection, how strong the thunderstorm activity is. When you see the white showing up there and the black shading, that's extremely cold cloud tops, meaning the thunderstorms extend to a very high altitude. Cold cloud tops, strong thunderstorms. That is a signal of an intensifying, or in this case, organizing storm system. Certainly an improvement from the last 24 hours when we were talking about this yesterday, when it's still kind of looking disheveled. Visible satellite imagery here, you can see that it has a spin. It's definitely starting to resemble a tropical system a little bit more. And as you see here from the updated advisory, it does have winds over tropical storm force. 39-mile-an-hour winds or stronger will be tropical storm, and we already have that. But why still the PTC name? We're going to get to that in a second. The system itself, very large stature still, close to 1,000 miles in diameter here. Interesting, because a week ago when we were talking about Gonzalo, that only had about a third of the size that this system has right now. Interesting, right? And that's probably also a reason why it's been able to hold off the dry air as we look at the water vapor imagery here on satellite. The dry air is the yellows and the oranges. You can see the circulation is doing a good job of holding that dry air out. And you can also pin out here the cirrus outflow. When you start to see that, the storm is ventilating a little bit better, it's breathing better, and that's also a signal that it's starting to get its act together and growing in intensity a little bit more. So again, why the name? Potential Tropical Cyclone, why are we still using that if we already have winds that are over tropical storm force? Yeah, it's already producing those winds, and it's bringing those winds and heavy rainfall to land areas, so it is impacting them. But there's still no defined center to this system, and we need that to get a name. And when that does get found by the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, Isaias is going to be that name, the 9th name system, the I name storm of 2020. Also, this designation of being a PTC right before we actually give it a name allows the National Hurricane Center to start issuing advisories on it, which they started doing yesterday. We have aircraft out in the storm as of the recording of this video, and they are looking for that defined center right now. They're flying out of St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Looks like they're headed back to base now after clocking some winds of 45 miles per hour, which was indicated on the latest advisory at 2 o'clock. You can see the track here from the Hurricane Center as of 2 o'clock. A little bit of some changes here since we last spoke yesterday. It does look to take it right over Hispaniola and then eventually to the north-northwest, and potentially, at least with this track, takes it off the west coast of Florida. But again, at this point in time in that cone, that's a 5-day cone, and the degree of uncertainty is still rather high, which is why the cone is larger. And also, I talked about this a little bit more yesterday too, but when you have a storm this large, almost 1,000 miles in diameter, it doesn't matter if the center is tracking anywhere within this. The effects will be felt well outside of where the cone is. So as we get closer, the cone gets smaller, and you may say, if you're living in Florida, well, I'm no longer in the cone. It doesn't matter with a system this size. You're going to see the impacts stretching out to a great distance. Now, the threat watch zone here, I really would still monitor this along the southeast coastline of the United States, almost more so than my concern for the Gulf Coast. I think that this is going to tend to turn a little bit sooner and tap into the Gulf Stream moisture there, the Gulf Stream warmth in the ocean, and potentially surprises with a strengthening as we get towards this weekend. So here's the watches and warnings that are associated with PTC number 9. We have a lot of tropical storm warnings that are all the areas in red, the northern leewards over to Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and even now into the Bahamas, where it turns yellow as a tropical storm watch, meaning you have a little more time here before impacts can be felt. About 48 hours here in the yellow, about 36 hours or less. In fact, imminent here in areas closer to Puerto Rico where the storm is closer right now. In terms of very strong winds, or tropical storm force winds at least, the likelihood is nearly certain that you'll see them in Puerto Rico, slightly less as you get towards the north coast of Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, and then into the Bahamas. Those chances are a little bit lower. This far out in time, they'll go up depending on the storm track. Now, in terms of rainfall, we could certainly see 6 inches or more of rainfall on the island of Puerto Rico as we get towards the next 48 hours or so, especially as that moisture is coming onshore from the south here, dependent on the exact track of the system. Now, let's talk about the ocean temperatures, because this is certainly not going to be a hindrance to this developing. We got plenty of the warmth out there. However, there is a very glaring, obvious thing here that would impact the strengthening of this system. Land impacts. And in this case, the track of this system takes it right over the highest peak, mountain peak, in the entire Caribbean. Pico Duarte, 10,000 plus foot peak. Mountains are not good. Land masses aren't good in general for tropical systems. You need that fuel source, the warm waters, right? But mountain peaks really start to tear it apart. So if this was a track right over it, it could certainly disrupt its circulation. But on the other hand, it's such a large system that it may be unfazed. Also, I will tell you this. I think that this is going to be something that tracks probably over the North Shore, or even over the open waters here north of the Dominican Republic. I think this is a little bit too far south, but we'll see how future models look. I will tell you the afternoon models were definitely kind of tilting this a little bit farther off towards the east, favoring more East Coast Florida track than what these models here are showing off the West Coast. So these are the computer models here. Some of them have not updated yet, but I think we're going to go for the east coast of Florida and then up the southeast coastline. Let's talk about the GFS Ensemble. Now, this is new. We haven't talked about this in a little while, at least since last season. The GFS Ensemble is the GFS model, but it has 21 members. And that is the model being run 21 different times, changing the initialization slightly to get a different outcome. Okay? And I'm stopping it here because I want you to look at where the model initializes, where they think, the computer models think the center is. Remember I said there's no defined center right now? Because there isn't. So the models do not have a place to initialize their forecast for. So they're all over the place here, north or south. So once we get a defined center, a latitude, longitude from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, when they find it, you can put it in the models and you get a better outcome. So keep that in mind. As we go forward here on the GFS Ensemble, notice, as I was saying, most of these now are leaning towards the east coast of Florida and then north, potentially threatening the Carolina coastline, South Carolina and North Carolina. Timing on that would be early next week if that verifies. All right, let's wrap things up today with more tropical waves coming off the coast of Africa. A very robust wave, several thousand miles off to the east of where we currently have PTC number 9, another weaker wave here. So the wave pipeline coming off the coast of Africa is certainly there as we get into August and September. These ocean temperatures continue to be supportive of tropical cyclones to develop. So watch it closely there. If you want to find me on social media, you can do so, Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. Again, we'll have another video tomorrow morning, and I'll be back tomorrow evening for another update for you, and if we do have Isaias, by that point in time as well. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.